What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks so much for downloading and listening, wherever you are listening, however you're listening. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. Connect with me there. The website, as always, dsmsports.net. The side hustle website, slyke.co, SLYKE. And you can find the podcast, whichever podcast platform is your favorite, including YouTube these days. I am so excited for the podcast today. This guest was just tremendous. I've been reading and listening to his work for so many years. The hockey season, NHL season is about to get started as well, so it's perfect timing. My guest on the podcast today is Sean McIndoe. He is also known as Down Goes Brown. If you've been following him, his writing, his work, his Twitter feed as well, among other places, Sean has been part of the NHL world for a long time. He's a sports writer covering the NHL world and hockey world overall. You can find him these days at The Athletic. He's been at Grantland and ESPN. He also does a podcast called Puck Soup, which is outside The Athletic. He's also on many podcasts at The Athletic under their Athletic Hockey Show feed. Just so much good stuff from Sean. He really created his own niche in the space and came at the idea of sports writing with a different angle and diving into the fun and minutia of some of the sport. Kind of a comedy angle, as you'll hear him talk about, and something that no one else was doing, that really no one else is doing these days as good as him, especially in the hockey world. Just so much information coming about how he found his niche, how he got started, how he grew his audience, how he's evolved over the years as platforms, technology, and really overall sports writing has changed as well. How he feels about the hockey world today and how the NHL markets itself and its sport and where fans fit in as well. Just a packed interview, lots of good stuff. Here he is, Sean McIndoe, also known as Down Goes Brown. I am back on the podcast with today's guest, and I'm so excited to be talking to him. I've been reading him for years, been listening to him for years, and now have him in the flesh, or at least his voice in the flesh on this audio podcast. My guest on the podcast today is Sean McIndoe. He is a national NHL columnist for The Athletic, also well known as the writer, editor, founder of the eponymous website Down Goes Brown. Welcome to the podcast today, Sean.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Really psyched to pick your brain. Really, no one has the finger on the pulse better of just hockey fandom and what moves hockey fans and some of the more fun angles in hockey, beyond the news, within the news as well. Before we get into the meat of our discussion today, I kind of want to hear about you. Tell us about your career path, how you got involved in this space, your stops along the way, and any tips for folks that want to try to do what you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough to give tips because the path that I took was a pretty unusual one. I guess I'll start with the fact that I wanted to be a sports writer, like growing up as a kid. I thought that just sounded like the coolest job. I am so old that I used to grab the newspaper sports section, and that was a fun afternoon for me to just like plow through. Like I grew up in Toronto, golden age of sports writing, like just Proudfoot and Orr and Shaky Hunt and all of those guys, Milt Dunnell, and just fantastic guys. And I just thought, like, man, to be able to just write about sports, talk about sports, have your opinion about sports, that'd be the best job in the world. And as I got older, I went to university for journalism. I did a 4-year degree at Carleton, graduated, bachelor of journalism. And by the time I graduated, I was just like, man, I don't know if I want to do this journalism thing. Because what I had figured out in that time is I really loved writing. I really did. I didn't love doing journalism. I didn't like calling people up, cold calling, knocking on doors, all of that stuff. It wasn't something I felt great about. And at the time, I won't lie, there wasn't exactly a lineup of places beating down the door trying to hire me. So I ended up taking a writing job at a software company doing like marketing style stuff. Still, some sort of using the degree a little bit, but I just kind of went, okay, I guess that's it. I guess, the sports writer thing isn't going to happen. That's fine. I can make a good living doing this stuff. And I did for several years. And then, and during that time, like I would still write about sports whenever I got a chance. Like I was the guy in like your fantasy football league writing the like way too detailed season previews where you kind of get, or here's the trade deadline breakdown and you're looking your inbox like, okay, I guess Sean's got a little too much time on his hands, but that's cool. And doing it for an audience, so, like 10 other dudes. And then 2008 is around the time where two things happen. Blogs are starting to pop up. Social media is just kind of starting to percolate, but it's, the blogosphere is what you would call it back then, and
Mhm.
these sites and SB Nation and stuff like that, and all these little and kind of organic sites that are outside of the grid as far as the big media places, but they're starting to pop up and become a thing. And the other thing that happens is, at the time in my job, I'm starting to get tasked with figuring out the social media stuff for the company I work for. So I'm like, well, I'm trying to get the VPs of my company to write a blog. I should have one too. I should go figure this stuff out. Like, I should get on Blogger and go start a blog that 10 people will read,
Mhm.
probably, if that. And I did. And for a while there were 10 people reading it, and then eventually 10 turned into 20, into 50, into 100, and it kind of grew from there. A lot of it thanks to the bigger other blogs out there who would find my stuff and link to it, and that was kind of how it worked back then. It was very sort of organic, and like, you help me and I'll help you, and we'll link to each other, and kind of try to rise, have this rising tide lift everyone up.
Yeah.
And just slowly but surely from there, started to build an audience. um Started to, Twitter comes along. That was a big part of me sort of getting on the radar of some of the more respectable people out there.
Mhm.
And culminated with eventually getting a chance to do it as a part-time job, as a way to make a little bit of money. Emphasis on a little bit, but I was happy, because as far as I used to tell people, like, hobbies are supposed to cost money. If you're into golf or photography or whatever, you spend money to do that. I got a hobby that actually puts money into
Yeah.
my pocket. That's cool. Um, and then eventually the hobbies did turn into a chance to do it as a part-time job, and then a full-time job, and that was about 10 years ago. And it's been ups and downs since. It's certainly not a exactly the most stable industry, but I've had a chance to keep doing it and keep having fun with it. It still feels like a hobby to me, as far as, it's still something I enjoy. It's worked out great. But as far as the lessons, I don't know. I don't know that, like, go get a degree and then and take 14 years to do something else and hope that some massive technological sea change comes along at exactly the right time is really a plan. But it worked for me.
No, I mean, you're talking to someone here in myself. This is a hobby for me, doing this podcast and being able to learn from great folks like you. So it's, chasing your passions, and you never know what's going to happen, and continue to be able to do what you love. And I guess as you started out, you had that I'm going to write about what I want, because you were just writing for yourself, 10 people, 20 people, whatever it might be. How do you start to develop like your understanding of this is my niche? Like, I'm not going to be writing what Darren Drager's writing, what Elliot Friedman's writing, what, name your hockey columnist, whatever. How did you start to find that niche that was yours, that you could own, and how intentional was it and strategic did it become as you made it your business, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't know that anything I ever did was, like, really intentional or strategic. Like, I never sat down with, like, a note and said, like, all right, here's a 5-year plan for whatever this
Right.
is going to be. Because I spent, like, until I was working full time, I always assumed that, like, I got 6 more months of this. And then it'll be, especially when I first started, even as it was growing, I'm like, it's a hobby, man. Like, I'm like most people. I pick something up, I do it for a while, and then I move on to something else. And I thought it would be that. But you're right. The whole thing of, and I don't know if people still say it anymore to people starting out, but back then it was like, find your voice.
Mhm.
Find your voice. What can you do that's going to be a little bit different than others? And I will tell you, when I first started, if you go back, my whole blog archives are there. When I first launched the blog, it was I was writing almost exclusively about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it's 2008. February, March 2008. Now, if you're a hockey fan, if you're a Leafs fan, this was right around the time of the infamous Muskoka 5 trade deadline, where the Toronto Maple Leafs are a very bad team. They've got a few good players. They need to trade those players to get young guys that will help them be good in the future. But all the guys they need to trade say, no, we like it here, even though we're losing all the time. We make lots of money. Our wives like it. We're not going anywhere. And it was this whole big thing. And they fire the GM, and they eventually the coach, and all sorts of change happens. And most of what I was writing at the time was like opinion stuff. Here's what the Leafs should do. Here's why this is good for the Leafs or bad for the Leafs.
Yeah.
Pretty typical uh sports columnist stuff, not that different from what you'd read in the Star or the Sun back then. And that's kind of what I wanted. I was fired up. I was a fired up Leafs fan. I wanted to let it rip. And I would write that stuff and it would kind of go out in the world and get like a very mild reaction, if anything. Largely because there were, 20 other bloggers doing the same thing.
Right.
The other thing that I would occasionally try is, in addition to being a huge sports fan growing up, I was always a comedy guy. Anything, stand-up comedy, but any, comedy writing, anything like that. I love that. And I was aware, I noticed like there didn't seem to be any crossover. There was very little in the way of sports comedy. Like that wasn't really a thing. And certainly on the hockey side, it just wasn't out there. And so I went, okay, well, if I'll do it. I'll give it a try. And whenever I did that, the reaction was not huge, but it was more than when I was just doing the garden variety, paint by numbers, here's who the Leafs should trade stuff.
Yeah.
And when I had like, I don't even know if we had the term go viral back then. Like it was just more like oh, this, got really unexpectedly popular. It was always that sort of stuff. Yeah. And so if there was a strategy that I mapped out, I think at some point I kind of realized it, and maybe this would be the advice to people starting out is, first of all, early on when there's nobody reading you, try a whole bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. Go nuts. Because I mean, what if you face plant, if it stinks, who cares? 5 people are going to see it. You'll know kind of what works for you and what doesn't, or at least you'll form an idea. And then from there, find that niche, find that voice, try to be number one at something. I have, in the past when I've talked to students in that, I say like, it's better to be number one at something very small than to be number 100 in the I'm Greg Wyshynski, I'm Greg Wyshynski's 100th backup. Like if 100 things happen to all the people ahead of me, I'll be the new Wish. And like, Greg's a friend of mine. He's awesome, but he's awesome because he's, he can do everything and he can do it fantastic. And he's built this decades long career doing it. But there's no market out there for the 100th best Wish, but there might be a market out there for the first or second or third best in some sort of niche. And it sounds a little daunting sometimes to say, be the best. You can be the best in a category of 1. That's better than being, like I was, hockey. I was the best hockey comedy writer in the world. And I can say that authoritatively with a lot of confidence, because guess what? There wasn't anyone else doing it. I was the only guy trying to do that stuff. When I started to have some success, there were like 3 or 4 other guys that like kind of dipped a toe in it, but there was no competition. Great. Yeah. So, I built that up as like, I was the best hockey comedy guy, and Twitter came along at exactly the right time for me, where that's a good, back then it was a good medium for that kind of stuff. And then, the other piece of it was I sort of realized, great, this is how I get my foot in the door. This is how I get my name known, but I'm not going to make a career out of being like the guy who makes one-liners about, Phil Kessel eating hot dogs. Right. So this is the start. It's like, the kind of the way I've described it to some of the students I've talked to in the past is it's kind of almost like, and this, again, as a strategy, this is me retconning what I did into a strategy. This was never me sitting down day one in 2008 going, this is what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of it's the big, little, big strategy. Start off big, write all sorts of things. Just don't limit yourself and see what works. Then drill down into something that's little that you can be the best at and make a reputation for yourself doing that. And then from there, you got to start getting big again, because you got to show the world that, okay, I'm the best at this, but that's not all I do, because very few places are out there looking to hire someone full time to do something niche. But if you can be the best at a niche and you can show that, but I can do all this other stuff too, now maybe you've got something. And it worked for me. The other piece of advice that I have to give, and this is a bummer because I get people email me sometimes, or, when I talk to them, the absolute number, what was the key to your success? Absolute number one thing, be lucky. Yeah. I hate to say it, man. Be lucky. It's so hard. There's so many people trying to do it. I could go pinpoint in my whole career 10, 12 times where it was like, this was just luck. Okay. And it's not pure luck. And I know like sometimes people get mad and they go, well, but I work hard. It's not luck. Yeah. You have to work hard. You have to be talented. And then you have to have some doors open at the exact right time. Mm-hmm. And if that does, you can be the best out there. And if those doors just don't open, it's probably not going to happen. And you have to accept that. And hopefully you view it as, like you said, it's something that's fun, something that feels like a hobby. If you're doing it that way, then even if it doesn't work and you never make any money at it, so what? You still got a fun hobby. And also maybe it can turn into this other thing. If you're starting out and you're like, man, I don't like this, but I'm doing this, like it's a job, it's probably not going to go well, because it's the chances are you're not going to get all those lucky breaks out of nowhere that people like me get to get where I'm at.
Oh yeah. So much good insight in there, Sean. I really appreciate you, reflecting on that. And I guess let's talk a little about how it's like going into that more, quote unquote, professional ranks where you are responsible for writing for an ESPN or Grantland, or nowadays with The Athletic, and thinking about like the things you're measured on when it comes to success. And you mentioned kind of branching out to some of the more, quote unquote, mainstream, for lack of a better term, maybe stuff that drives page views, subscriptions. But a lot of your best stuff is, relatively more esoteric. Like you are writing for sometimes people that are not necessarily casual hockey fans, but hockey fans that know about Phil Kessel and the hot dog story without needing somebody to explain the context of it. Myself, I put in that category. So how do you balance sort of the stuff that is for the hockey fan, and then stuff that's maybe more attractive to casual, stuff that maybe has a higher ceiling, versus stuff that maybe more is that more engaged audience that's more, in your community and diehards? Like, how do you think about that balance, or does that not really come into play at all? You just write what you think is fun for you, and it's going to perform how it's going to perform.
I mean, that's some of it, and I've been lucky enough to work at places where, we haven't been measured just on page views. Like at Grantland, which was the first place I worked full time. They quite literally did not show us any metrics as far as page views or anything like that.
Yeah.
Their view was write good stuff and the rest of it will take care of itself. Turned out not to take care of itself, but at the time that was the view. And I remember like when they first hired me part-time, I remember I was talking to somebody high up the chain there, and I was like, yeah, let's try this out for a couple months. I'll do my stuff, and we'll see how it works. And they were like, yeah, that's great. We'll see if the audience is into it. And I was like, yeah, and we'll see what the numbers look like. And the guy was like, no, don't worry about the numbers. Like, we just want to find out. And I thought, okay. And then like later in the conversation, I said again, like, and if the numbers are good, and he was like, I'm going to stop you there. He's like, stop talking about the numbers. He's like, that's really not what we do here. Write good stuff. Do not chase numbers. Do not, that's not what we want. And even back then that was rare, but that's what happens when you have a guy like Bill Simmons, who is a writer first and foremost back then, and can build the site that he knows other writers would want to work for. It was great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Athletic, much more metrics driven business. We've got our dashboards and all of that stuff, but even there, it's not pure. It's certainly, as a subscription based business, it's not just about page views. Every time we write something someone doesn't like, they come in like, oh, it's clickbait. It's like, dude, we're a subscription model. Like, right. What do you think it helps me to get 100,000 people to click on something that they hate? Like, it walk me through how you think that benefits me or the site. So it's been nice to do that in a way that, I'm not constantly, churning out, 10, I'm not sitting there going, I got to do 10 posts a day and I got to rank first in Google and I got to, jam in keywords into the headline and all of that stuff. It can be more of, hey, I can write what I want. Now, there is still that kind of like the diehards versus the niche. And I try to service both. You're right. You can't go completely niche all the time. That if it's too niche, because the audience just isn't like there at some point there just isn't enough, even if that's not what you're being directly measured by. But at the same time, that niche audiences are going to be the ones who love you the best. And, I get into this discussion sometimes, argument maybe, with an editor from time to time, where I will I'll slip a joke or a reference into a piece
Mhm.
that's very niche. It's a reference to something that happened 10 years ago, or so, something that you have to be one of the diehards to get it.
Mhm.
And they'll come in and be like, all right, I'm gonna put a link I'm just gonna link in that thing that you wrote to something that explains it. I found, I had to Google it and I found this thing. And I'm like, don't do that. Don't put the link in because that ruins it. And they're like, yeah, but 99% of people won't get that. And I said, that's fine. 99% of people won't get it. They'll be confused for 2 seconds. They'll go on to the next paragraph and they'll forget about it. But the 1% who do get it are going to be like, this is my guy.
Yeah.
This is the guy that all right. Like I right away, like, and then they run to the comments to brag about how they got they got it and, explain it to other people and all that sort of stuff. You can't do that all the time, but I like doing it sometimes because it's like the little wink to a portion of the audience. And it's not a gatekeeping thing. It's not like, oh yeah, if you don't get it, this article isn't for you. It's just, hey, there's levels to this. And hopefully I'm skilled enough to pull it off in a way that it doesn't ruin the piece or the flow for the other 99%. But that 1% is going to, like, 5 years later, they'll be like, I still remember that joke you made about this. And that was great. And, I've ever since I've been reading your stuff. So there's a balance, but you can play with it a little bit.
Hell yeah. I mean, and largely the athletic success is largely because hockey fans were not being served elsewhere by, AP articles and basic traditional media that you can go to a place like the Athletic, pay for the subscription so that you can get the more diehard coverage and someone that you feel like is, with you and part of your community. And I guess from a larger perspective too, as you look at the growth of NHL and hockey in general, as ESPN obviously got back in the game. Turner's done a good job. We've seen Spit and Chicklets grow their presence. Like, how have you seen kind of the makeup of the NHL fan base evolve as hopefully the NHL pie overall has grown and more people are watching the Stanley Cup final, more people are watching an average whatever Blackhawks Oilers game on TNT on a Thursday night. Do you see that there's more casual fans coming? Or the old casual fans becoming more avid? And what do you think is the best way to sort of measure the health of the sport overall?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say. I don't know the audience is really growing that much. I know that every time, every time the playoffs roll around or there's some season opener, we always get the press release, biggest audience ever.
Right.
And then you like read down and it's always, there's like 6 qualifiers and then Sports Business Journal has an article like lowest audience ever. And you're like, it's the same game, man. Like what's going on here? I think the NHL, I've been banging this drum for a long time now. They haven't done enough to grow the audience. They haven't done enough to make the product, appeal to as many people as they can. I think what Gary Bettman has done well is he is figuring out how to squeeze more and more money out of the audience they do have and to maximize, how much they can get from that. And that can be a business model. A lot of sports or entertainment places out there are realizing that, hey, I can't grow the audience, but what I can do is figure out who my real core audience is and then just grab them by the ankles and hold them upside down and shake them. And that's sort of what the Bettman model has been.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I mean, look, for what I do, the audience is plenty big enough. For me, I'm not out there chasing, millions and millions and trying to be that super mainstream guy. Nobody in hockey is doing that. As far as how the audience has evolved, you're right. I mean, there's more and more stuff, and there's more stuff out there to appeal to people that clearly there's an audience for that hadn't been there before. I'm sure there are some elements of that are untapped now. You have this relatively new thing where people used to almost identify themselves by what team they cheered for. That's as old as sports, but now it's like a lot of people identify themselves based on what media they consume, which is deeply weird to me. Like, I'm a Chicklets guy. All right, cool. I get all my stuff from Outkick. Awesome. Never talk to me, please. I don't, that's, and it's just like, all right, I guess, but, some of that is the more personal style of writing, and certainly podcasts, it's a much more, it feels like a much more social thing. And you start to identify with people and it's all good. Like it's more opportunities. It's more, and I really mean that when I said like, hey, if you like Outkick, please never talk to me. Yeah, I feel that way. But also, I'm not saying shut the site down. I'm not saying you don't ever get to like the stuff that you like. Go like the stuff that you like. Don't ever talk to me about it because it's stupid. But go ahead and like your stupid stuff. You're allowed to. I like some stupid stuff too. And let's get the audience out there. And I don't love the thing where some of it kind of turns into like, let's turn. Oh, if you like my site, that means you have to hate these guys. Or if you listen to my podcast, we're enemies with these. Like, what are we doing? Like, but at the same time, some marketing guy would be like, no, that's how you build loyalty. That's how you do this and that. I guess that makes sense. It's not really my angle on things, but it's for the most part the changes to it's been good for fans. I guess is what I'll say. The media landscape right now, as much as I loved growing up reading those 4 or 5 columnists, the landscape right now for a young hockey fan is so much better than it was back then when it was so limited. And there's so much stuff out there. It's not better for the people actually running a business on the content. Right. And that's the stuff that has to be figured out or not figured out, and the consequences of that will follow. And if I'm the audience, I'm a little bit concerned about that, only because at some point, if it gets bad enough, a lot of the places that I like go away and probably don't get replaced. But in the meantime, I'm loving having all the choice out there and all the different types of content and different ways to consume it. And I'm having fun with it. And it is better now for the audience, the readers and listeners, than it was back when that was me.
Totally, yeah. I mean, different entry points to the game, and kind of circling back to maybe something we talked about earlier, where it's in a different way of looking at it. A rising tide is lifting all the boats, and if we have more hockey fans at the end of the day, regardless of how they choose to consume, what angles they choose to consume, whether they care more about a power player PK strategy versus who Trevor Zegras was dating, they're all fans, and so hopefully we'll continue to grow that pie overall. But
yeah, Sean, I'm with you 100%, and the gatekeepers can go get banned. Like I hate that stuff. I hate that stuff where can you name 5 players? Shut up, man. Like, hockey players are ridiculous for that, because the two things hockey fans, not players don't care. The two things hockey fans love doing most are complaining that there aren't enough hockey fans. Right. Mm-hmm. How come everybody doesn't see this sport the way I do? How come you don't know? And then the second anybody new shows up, just absolutely kicking them in the ass and getting them out of turning them around and sending them home because they don't know it. Oh, how dare you ask a question? How dare you get a player's name? Like, I remember, and again, like I'm Bill Simmons was a guy I read a ton growing up back when he was, for you kids out there, Bill Simmons used to write. And I used to read his stuff all the time. Used to print it off, take it to the bathroom at work. That was the classic page 2 Bill Simmons move for us back then. And I remember, I can tell you, haven't worked with him at Grantland and for him, and had a few conversations, not a lot, but had a few conversations. Like, the guy does like hockey. He doesn't cover hockey a lot because, again, hockey doesn't have the audience. But he does like hockey. And, I would get emails from him because he'd be at a game and he'd be fired up about something. The guy likes hockey. And people used to complain, Bill Simmons never writes about hockey. He's supposed to be this Boston guy, but he never talks about the Bruins. It's all Pats and Celtic. And then I remember there was one thing, I don't remember the exact circumstances, but he tweeted, I want to say, about hockey. And I think it was Rich Peverly, but he got his name wrong. He called him like Rick or something like that. And I remember just like for weeks, the hockey audience was just like, making their like Peverly jokes and like, can you believe that Bill Simmons? Yeah. And I'm just sitting there like, that's great. Yeah, great job, guys. He's the most popular sports writer in the world. One of the few guys with a big enough audience that he could actually like help you create new fans. He made one mistake and you're going to like beat the crap out of him. And guess what? Yeah, he didn't write about hockey after that. Wonderful job, everyone. Like, you really good, really cool. But you got 18 retweets on your your hilarious takedown. So I guess it all balances out. Like, I hate that stuff, but it kind of is. I mean, that's not a hockey fan thing or even a sports fan thing. That's an internet thing. I know there's other industries that have much bigger problems with the gatekeeping stuff, but I guess my message to hockey fans is, man, pick a lane. You want to, if you want hockey to be a little niche, small thing that only you're cool enough to know about, okay. You want it to be the cool indie band, but
Yeah.
that's fine. But then don't complain. And at the same time, you're going to complain that not enough people are on it. Like hockey fans are all like we're all that like we've got the cool indie band. We're like, why doesn't everyone like? Why isn't this the biggest band in the world? And then they put out an album that goes to number 1, and we go, oh man, they've changed. No, they haven't. It's exactly the same. It's just you being you're being a wiener about this, about how it's not your little secret thing anymore. I don't like the gatekeepers. Man, they bug me.
Such a good point. And I hate to end on a dourish note, but hey, it's all in the hopes that
I'm a Leafs fan, man. It's all dour notes. It's fine. I don't have any other arrows in my quiver, so we're good.
But we'll hopefully have a few fun things coming up in our next segment. First episode shareable stat coming up right now. So great being able to talk to Sean. Again, you can find him these days at The Athletic, among many other places. We'll get into that more. But we're going to have some fun with Sean coming up in our one-timer segment, so stick around for that because there's a lot more to come. Great stories, great insights. You're going to want to stick around for that next segment. But first episode, shareable stat. This episode shareable stat is kind of a unique one, and it is $18,175. $18,175. That is the approximate amount that Mr. Beast saved when instead of giving away $20,000 for a campaign, he gave away a year supply of Doritos. So they could have spent $20,000 for a great prize, a cash prize, or they could have given away a year supply of Doritos. A lot cheaper, also a lot more compelling and engaging and clickbaity to some degree. So it really gets you thinking about how can you be creative, not just to save money as it did in this case, but thinking beyond the obvious. Yes, you can have cash prizes, you can have ticket prizes, and this doesn't have to do just with contests and sweepstakes as well. Of course, that is the lens under which we're talking about today because of the shareable stat. But really thinking about how can you add that little bit of wow factor to everything that you're doing when it comes to fan engagement. Something that's going to really get eyeballs, get someone to stop scrolling, get someone to want to watch and not be able to resist, get them to retain as well once they do start watching. Lots of stuff in the document recently that came out of really Mr. Beast's kind of like manifesto or his mission statement, his guidelines for anyone that works with him or for him, gives you a lot of good insight into things they try to do to make sure that their audience is growing, make sure their audience is valuable and sticks with them, make sure their content is attractive and people want to come and watch it. All the stories about the thumbnails and all the signs, really taking a scientific look at engagement, audience development, and social media. So again, just an opportunity to step back and think about what you're doing, challenge the sort of status quo, and think about like what behavior you're trying to drive, and is there a more creative way that we can drive that? Tapping into user psychology, tapping into data, getting scientific about it, getting really thoughtful about what you're doing, and not being afraid to be creative and think outside the box, and not being afraid to fail as well and try new things all the time. So that's a shareable stat. A really interesting one, I thought. Again, that's $18,175. That is the amount that Mr. Beast saved because instead of giving away $20,000, they gave away a year supply of Doritos. What is your version of giving away Doritos instead of cash or instead of something that's more traditional? Think about it, ponder it, but more importantly, stick around because lots more fun coming with Sean McIndoe of The Athletic. Back in this episode of Shareable Stat, and I'm joined once again by Sean McIndoe. He is national NHL columnist for The Athletic and founder, writer, editor with Down Goes Brown. Also hosts and is a host on podcast. If you're in the hockey world, you have definitely heard of Down Goes Brown and Sean McIndoe. Sean, you kicked ass in your interview. Are you now ready to take a few one-timers?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. First, number one, tell me the most viral story you've written, however you want to define it, and on whichever site you've published on. The most viral story.
I mean, I've certainly had stories on The Athletic that had a very big audience, but the first, my first time going viral was way back, a few months into the blog where I did a suspension flow chart. Here's how the NHL determines suspensions, and it was it wasn't even like. Maybe this gives you a hint of my talent as a writer. It wasn't even an article. It was a visual. Like I actually created this thing in the flowchart software that we had as a company. And it was one of the ones where I remembered like hitting send on that. And then like going to lunch or a meeting or something like that. And then coming back and sitting in my dad and being like, oh, I posted that thing. Let's go see if it has any comments. Like, it'd be cool if it already had like 2 or 3 comments and there was like 20 or 30. And being like, oh, that's weird. That's a lot. And then like seeing, back then it wasn't, instantaneous, like, oh, look, I can see who retweeted me or whatever, but seeing that like this thing was getting picked up in other places. And for a couple of days, like it was showing up and being like, oh, okay, so this is what happens when something, blows up. And, it was probably got like 1,000 views instead of 100, but it was that different feeling of, oh, okay, I get it now. This is what happens when something kind of jumps the track from just your audience into a wider audience, and then all the good and bad that comes with that.
Yeah, what a cool like early lesson too, in the kind of the anatomy of how something grows, especially back in those days when it wasn't just like you said, a single retweet. It was this blog linked back to mine, and then this person picked it up, and very interesting to think about the old school ways of how things got out there.
Yep. Yeah, and to this day, people still like, hey man, the flow chart. It's like, yeah, okay. They're like, that's where I found you. All right.
And I love that niche in general of like the different ways you like this, the types of fan bases, or these are like the things that fans are feeling, and these are the bandwagon tiers. Like that's why I love reading your stuff, man. Number 2 for you, Sean. Tell me your favorite obscure and or just dumb hockey rule that is still officially on the NHL rulebooks. This is one area that I love some of the stuff that you've come up with over the years.
Oh man, there are so many good ones. My favorite is probably well, I mean, my favorite old obscure one is the fact that the goalie can't freeze the puck. A lot of people don't know that. The goalie can't freeze the puck unless he's being actively checked by the other team. So like when there's a slap shot and he makes a glove save and the whistle blows right away, that's not what the rule book says.
Oh, wow.
There is, there's that whole thing where, people, especially these days, I hate replay, and I'm always getting into arguments with people, and they're going, "Well, you gotta just follow the rule book, just follow the." And I'm like, "You want to follow the rule book? Okay." Like I wrote a piece on that. I'm like, goalies can't freeze the puck. It's an automatic penalty if you swear. You're not allowed to attempt to get anyone else to commit a penalty. You can't try to, get so every Kachuk brother, every like all of that. Are in the penalty box all the time. You're not allowed to question the referee. That's an automatic like, let's do all of it. Sure, you want to follow the rule book. Let's do that. But the other one I love is, and this came up this year. It was an obscure rule for a while, but it actually came up this year. The idea that if you pull your goalie in overtime, you don't get the loser point. Which is kind of a leftover rule from the earliest era of the loser point, where they didn't want both teams pulling their goalies and turning it into a farce. But my favorite part of that is that obscure loophole of you don't get a point if you pull your goalie has a loophole of its own, which is even more obscure, which is if you pull your goalie in overtime and the other team is about to score on you, your goalie cannot jump back on the ice in order to reclaim your loser point. Once your goalie is pulled, that's it. So you can't on the fly switch back. And I love that, because the only way a rule like that exists is like when they were passing the original rule, some GM puts his hand up and he's like, look, what if? And they're all like, oh, geez, man, we just want to go golfing. Like, really? Like, you're going to make us? All right, fine. We'll put this like little addendum to this stupid rule that's only going to ever come into play once every 10 years. But yeah, if you've ever wondered, like, could the goalie just sit on the boards and like, oh, my skates were on the ice, we get our point. No, the NHL actually has you covered on that.
Oh, so perfect. I could literally listen to you talk NHL rules, obscure rules all day. Next one for you, Sean. Tell me the first NHL game you remember attending, and also the most recent NHL game you've attended.
Boy, I don't remember like my specific like first game. Like I don't have like, oh, it was this day. I remember going to the Gardens. It was with my dad, sitting up in like the probably the Blues, and feeling really confused that the announcer, I couldn't hear the announcers. That I couldn't hear the play-by-play. I didn't hear Bob Cole or whoever like being like, what's going on? What do you mean? Like that's not a thing. Like it just never occurred to me that you couldn't hear that. So I remember that. I remember one time going to a game where the Oilers were playing, and two guys in front of me were like heckling Gretzky the whole time. And I was just like, wow, this is so cool. Like these guys are, look at this. This is so subversive. And then like my first really crystal clear memory was being at the playoff game, that the Leafs lost to the Blues, the Sergio Momesso game, where he beats Alan Bester from beyond the blue line. Yeah. And just like, that was a great like classic, because the thing people forget about that, well, I mean, people have no idea what game I'm talking about. But even the old timers forget the Leafs were down 2 goals. They scored twice with the goalie out, and it was like the place is going nuts. And then that happens, and it was like, right, okay. I'm like, Dad, is my whole life as a Leaf fan going to be like this? And he was like, yeah, pretty much. Man, and my most recent game, I don't remember. Like, I don't go to many games. Like, I my most recent NHL game actually would have been the All-Star game. Because I don't. I'm here in Ottawa. I don't go to Senators games. Nobody does. But sorry.
Sorry, Ian Mendez.
Apologies to Ian Mendez, who's going to probably like text me now for saying that. But now that he's sold out, but I don't have to like go sit in a press. Like you don't have to sit in a press box to sit on your couch and make smart aleck jokes. So it's I don't. But yeah, probably the All-Star weekend would have been the last NHL stuff I saw in person.
Oh yeah, that was fun stuff. I'm excited for this next question. Tell me the coach, past or present, who has driven the most like fun or storylines for you to cover.
Oh boy, the coach.
You can go a lot of directions.
Man, because if it was GMs, it'd be easy. It'd be Brian Burke. I mean, Brian Burke was probably like the single most important personality to have in Toronto and that. But boy, the coach. Yeah, I mean, like from a history perspective, it's got guys like Mike Keenan. Like anytime you're looking for something to write weird about history, you just Google Mike Keenan, find some like Mike Keenan fact you didn't know, and you'll be like, what the hell? Like this guy was nuts. And you could just go from there. So he's like definitely my Hall of Fame guy as far as just the absolute like bizarre story. Like this dude got into a fight at the 85 Stanley Cup final over like whether goalies could have water bottles on their net or not. Like back then, like that was like this crazy subversive thing that he was doing, like sending water bottles out there, and got into a fight with the Oilers about it. And there've been all of these other things. So I'll just give the shout out to Mike Keenan as the crazy coach of all time, that the gift that keeps on giving. Put him in the Hall of Fame.
I love it. This one might be a fun one, but a tough one. The best hockey movie all time is blank. Best hockey movie.
So, as people who listen to Puck Soup know, I'm not necessarily the most avid movie watcher. I've never been a slapshot diehard, in the sense that I'm not completely sure whether I've ever sat down start to finish and actually watched Slapshot. I've seen the movie like Ship of Thesis style. Like I know every clip. I know all the like the catchphrases and everything. I don't know if I ever like as a kid sat down and like start to finish watched it. So I'm gonna go with my two favorites. I can't pick between them. Youngblood.
Yep.
Which is of movies that are pure hockey movies, Youngblood is the one. It's so good. It's so stupid. Like so many things about it are just like it's so rewatchable. The big fight scene at the end, like it's the best, man. I've often said like all-time best sword fights in a movie theater. It's the Man in Black versus Inigo Montoya. It's Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker, and it's Youngblood versus Rocky at the end of Youngblood. And then the other one, even though a lot of people would say it's not a hockey movie, Sudden Death. Rob Van Dam fighting the Penguins mascot in the kitchen, and then becoming the goaltender for Game 7 overtime before a helicopter crashes into the stadium. Chef's kiss. A+, no notes. Would rewatch anytime, any day.
Some excellent ones there for sure. I love it. Coming down the wire here. Tell me the current NHL player whose off ice impact is highest right now. Who has the highest like Q rating, or who can move the needle the most when it comes from off ice perspective?
Boy, that's a good question, especially in the NHL world where famously we don't have a lot of that. And you mentioned who's Trevor Zegras dating or whatever. I mean, I'm sure there's a whole audience of that's really mad at some random Blue Jackets guy for breaking up with a singer or whatever. I mean, it's probably Matthew Tkachuk, like given the combination of personality, star power, the team he plays for, the fact that it's a great team. all of that stuff. In a different universe, it should be McDavid. Matthews would be up there, but again, it's the personality isn't maybe quite there, and being in Canada versus the U.S., I guess it's Tkachuk. And I guess the fact that I'm saying I guess is probably not a great sign for the NHL, but I'd love for us to get these personalities shining a bit more, and but it is a whole hockey culture thing that these guys just do not want to be seen to stand out, and it sucks, and it's costing them collectively lots and lots of money, but it's their thing. So who am I to tell them they're wrong?
Oh yes, yeah. We've seen, Connor Bedard seems to be in that mold as well, or it's very quiet and humble. And we got the Hughes brothers. Maybe the Hughes brothers seem to be having fun. But yeah, Matt Tkachuk, we saw him, recently recreate the Jason Tatum photo. So we can ride those coattails well with the NBA.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. Anything the one hockey player who was ever cool enough to be friends with an NBA player gets to be our guy.
There we go. All right, this would be a hard one, but maybe an easy one. I'm gonna force you to name the next 3 cities to get NHL teams. Will be which ones? Next 3.
Boy. All right. Atlanta, I think pretty clearly is going to get one. I think Arizona, because the NHL very clearly wants to go back there, and now that they've got the idiot owner out of the picture, I think they'll get back there as quickly as they can. Mm-hmm. And then, as much as I'd love to say Quebec City or another team in Toronto or something like that, I think probably Houston is going to be the next one after that. I could see, big market, give it a try. Might work, might not, but I feel good about Atlanta and Arizona. Houston's a little more questionable just because we've been talking about them for feels like 20 years and it never quite happens. But let's put them on the list. You made me do 3, so they'll be number 3.
That's why I chose 3 strategically, because that third one I knew was going to be a difficult one. Number 8, if I go out there and visit you in Ottawa, tell me the best meal to get in Ottawa and where to get it, and also the best meal you've had at an NHL game ever.
Ooh, boy. Okay, best meal in Ottawa. I mean, I'll say this just because downtown Ottawa's got some good places. Just because I was just there, and this is my little. There is a place out here in Barrhaven, which is where I'm at. It's a little suburb. It's like 15 minutes out of Ottawa. Little strip mall, Greek restaurant called Penelope's, and they do a pulled pork fettuccine, which I know sounds like a weird mix, but it's like. It is fantastic. It was my anniversary a couple days ago. Took the wife there, and we walk in, and she's just looking at me because it's such good stuff, and it's one of these small little places, family owned. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you just look at your mouth is watering as you're looking at the menu, but she's just staring at the menu, and then she looks at me, and I got my menus turned over in front of me, and she's like, "You're not even looking, are you?" I'm like, "Nope, we're doing the fettuccine. It is so good." And I housed that. They brought it, and it's this huge serving, and I was like, all right, here we go. It's one of those you don't eat during the day just so you got extra space. Fantastic place. That I'll give them the shout out as my favorite. That's my last meal if I ever have one. I'm going there. And it was the best meal at a hockey game. Mm-hmm. It was the Maple Leaf Gardens nachos, the 1980s Maple Leaf Gardens nachos. I've said before, man, I'd pay $1,000 to go in a time machine and go back to Maple Leaf Gardens, and what they gave you a little cardboard box, they filled it with nacho chips. But the difference is, unlike today where you get that, and then you get the little baggie of lukewarm cheese that you have to put on yourself. No, they had a ladle of boiling hot, lava hot cheese adjacent product that they would just pour all over this stuff. The chips immediately melted and fused together. The little cardboard box had holes in it, so the cheese would drip onto your hands. You'd get second degree skin burns. And then there was this salsa bin that was just at the front, and it hey, you could put your own salsa and your own jalapenos in there. And it'd been sitting there, people had spilled beer in it. There's cigarette butts. Everybody has been it's just sitting there. You layer that on, you just go back to your seat, and this. Oh, it was so good. It was the absolute highlight. Like that was your intermission. Go out, acquire that, come back. The cheese, I don't know how, but the cheese went from boiling hot for like 5 minutes and then ice cold instantly. Like there was no middle ground. So you're just trying to eat these chips, peel them off each other, get as much of the, try to avoid the cigarette butt in your salsa, try to work in the jalapenos, like absolute A plus. And you'll never see it again because, these days today, the snowflakes today, I tell you, they can't handle their molten lava cheese. You'd never have it again, but it was the absolute best.
Oh,
Best meal I've ever had, period, anywhere.
phenomenal answers there. Now I just want to kind of try to combine the pulled pork fettuccine with a ladle of that hot cheese, and we're in business.
Oh, it's got like a ladle. Like you just like poured it all over. It was great. Like, and some accountant would come along and be like, well, that way we're wasting cheese and we can get it down to 4.2 ounces of cheese per, man, everything sucks today. Back then, I tell you, you kids today, you don't know.
Oh gosh. A couple quick ones here to finish off. This is I have no idea where we're gonna go with this one, but tell me, what is the one hockey related video on YouTube that we should all go look up right now? That someone, whether they are a hockey fan or not, go look the video up on YouTube because you have to see it.
Wow, there are so many old good ones. I guess I will go with the one you got to go see, and God, I miss this too. This is another thing we've lost along the way because of woke or not. But the time in the 80s and early 90s where teams used to do these random ass lip sync videos where they would like hire a band to sing a song and then they would do this. And the Washington Capitals are the kings of it. But the first one was the Calgary Flames. You Can't Touch a Flame When It's Red Hot is the name of the song. Look up Calgary Flames Red Hot and just sit back and enjoy. And especially if you're an old timer fan, you're going to recognize some of the guys in there. But it is so awkward. It is so good. It is so cringe worthy. You will feel all the emotions. Can't touch a flame when it's red hot. By the way, you can. When a flame is red, that's the only time you can touch it. So I mean, right off the bat, we're scientifically inaccurate with our title, but it is just it is you talk about a ladle full of cheese. That's it right there. And then hopefully from there, if the algorithm's working well, it'll serve you up all the other ones. The Leafs did a couple in the early 90s, and they're all out there. And then it's back then when music was king.
Oh, just so good. I knew you would nail that question perfectly. Really, really awesome. All right, last one for you. This might be a difficult one. I didn't go Leafs directly, but tell me the over/under for career Stanley Cups for one Austin Matthews.
The over/under. I put the over/under at 1.5. I think he does get one. It's probably not in Toronto. Let's be honest.
That's what I was thinking. Is it going to be Toronto or not?
He's taking a big look, man. I'm a pessimistic Leafs fan these days. I go up and down, but these days, I think most of us are not feeling great about the whole operation. But because I'm pessimistic, anyone who leaves the Toronto Maple Leafs eventually gets an immediate +10 bonus to their Stanley Cup winning ability. And I mean, whether it's Matthews or Marner or whoever it is, 100%. We are going to, some guy's going to get driven out of town for not performing the playoffs and then go on and not just win the cup, but win a Conn Smythe. There's no question. If you went up to any Leaf fan and said, do you think Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner or Willie Nylander will ever win a Conn Smythe with a different team? They'd be like, oh yeah, that's happening for sure. God. So I'm giving Austin one. He's running out of runway here to get multiple ones, but yeah, he'll probably go and be the number 3 center on some other team. And by the way, he'll take a discount to do it too. That'll be the really fun part when he signs with Colorado for $2 million a year because he's like, I just want to win. And every Leaf fan is just like, all right, I'm gonna go lay down in traffic now. Thank you, Austin.
Too much fun. I'm definitely getting an education in the mindset of the poor Leafs fans yourself.
Yeah, we're fun. We're really cool to hang out with.
Sean, you kicked ass with your one-timers. Now your chance briefly to take over the podcast. Tell us your social media all-star follow. Just tell us someone, whether they're on Twitter, Threads, wherever, a blogger, whatever platform they're on. Tell us who they are and why you'd recommend we follow them.
Boy, my favorite Twitter follower is a guy. It's Acting the Foolaman. I don't know if you know it's which is a pun on a guy who used to play for the Leafs. But it's on Twitter. It's ATFULEMIN, and the reason I like him, he's just funny as hell. Who is he? I have no idea. Never met the guy. Don't know. Hopefully, he's not like some awful person that I've just recommended. But he's very funny. If you're one of those people who's like, yeah, man, I miss when Down Goes Brown used to tell jokes and he wasn't, always just spamming us with links to stuff. This guy's right up there. He has one of the greatest tweets I've ever seen. He's probably best known in hockey as the Mark Donk guy. He's the guy who had the tweet about the Penguins always having some guy named Mark Donk or Buzz Fibbit. Yeah. And that's kind of become a thing, right? Like, who's the latest Mark Donk? But his tweet was, and hopefully I can get the quote right, but he said that, a lot of people think the idea of sports is to be happy. It's not. The idea of sports is to be sad in a group. And it's like, yeah, that nailed it. That is absolutely. And it's one of those fun tweets where like he will occasionally mention like something must have happened because I'm getting a bunch of retweets on that. Like, I don't know what happened somewhere, but like some soccer team has found that tweet. They just lost the UA Premier Cup or whatever, and they've now found that, or some rugby team in Australia is now all over this. And but that's it. So yeah, okay, give that guy a follow.
Great recommendation, great shout out. And how about you, Sean? Where can we find you and all your presences across digital, social, and beyond?
You can find me on Twitter, Down Goes Brown, tweeting occasionally, not anywhere near as much as I used to because of Twitter. But you can find me there and find me at The Athletic. Check my website, Down Goes Brown, is just where I kind of post all the articles and podcasts and stuff that I'm doing, so you can find it there. Go to The Athletic and subscribe after clicking on one of my articles so that I get credit for it. There's probably a discount of some sort now. I don't know. But you can get me in all those usual places, and as well as on the Puck Soup podcast, which is a very fun one that we do. So
yeah, you'll hear him on Puck Soup, you hear him on the Athletic Hockey Show periodically, you'll read him on the Athletic, you'll read him on Down Goes Brown. Just one of my favorite people to follow and read and consume in hockey, and really cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today, Sean.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Such good stuff, being able to talk to Sean McIndoe, again, also known as Down Goes Brown, if you've been following him for years, as I have, been reading him, listening to him, just so much good stuff that he does in the NHL space, and really just taking that unique angle to sports writing in general. Really appreciate Sean coming on the podcast today and giving us some of his insight and wisdom that he's accrued over the years. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Get ready for NHL season. Hope you are ready for it. But you can find me continuing to talk about social media sports. Again, I'm on Twitter, NJ287. Also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. The website, dsmsports.net, and Slyke, SLYKE.co. And of course, follow the podcast. Follow along on your preferred podcast platform. We got more great shows coming for you as we get into the fall and winter seasons coming up. But until next time, this is your host, Neil Horowitz, signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.